Hi, everyone. This is the first time in 10 years that we are not presenting our research live to you at the summit. And we really miss being in the same room with all of you.
And we have some really exciting research on mental wellness to share with you today. And so we'll look forward to chatting with you on Zoom after this presentation.
Mental wellness is a subject that is getting a lot of attention this year. The threat of getting COVID, the vast number of people who got ill and who died, the financial stress, social isolation, and the uncertainties, they are putting a huge strain on all of us. But even before COVID, people have become more stressed, unhappy, and lonely around the world. Globally, more than 15% of people have diagnosed mental illness or substance abuse disorders. Some estimates said that our poor mental health and wellness will be a $16 trillion burden on the global economy by 2030. But most importantly, it causes a lot of suffering to people, their families, and their communities in the form of poor health and education outcomes, unemployment, poverty, and even homelessness. This grim picture is the reason why mental wellness is so important now and why it has attracted so much interest and excitement from consumers and business. People are desperate for strategies to improve their mental health, and businesses have been jumping in to offer all kinds of products and solutions. But what exactly is mental wellness? Who is in the business of mental wellness? And what are they offering? How big is the mental wellness sector? These are the key questions that we try to answer for the first time in our research study. So let's dive right in. What is mental wellness? Many organizations have described what is mental health and well-being. Here we have created a simple definition that distills many concepts in the field of health and psychology. Mental wellness is a resource that helps us think, feel, connect, and function. It is an active process that helps us to build resilience, grow, and flourish. Now let's unpack this definition. First, there are two parts. Mental wellness is both a resource and a process. By resource, we mean that it is a reservoir that can be replenished and also depleted. And by process, we mean that mental wellness is dynamic and we have to actively engage with it. These four ovals represent the different dimensions of mental wellness. Mental is how we process, understand, and use information. Emotional is how we manage and express our feelings. Social is how we connect with others. And psychological is how we put the pieces together to make decisions and function on a daily basis. Now let's drill down a bit on mental wellness. There's a tendency to think of mental health as a continuum, a line from mental illness to mental wellness. Instead, I want to show you a different approach, a dual continuum that we have adapted from the work of well-known psychologists. The horizontal line is a mental wellness spectrum, from high to low or no mental illness. On this, we overlay a vertical line that we called mental wellness spectrum, which goes from languishing to flourishing. When we look at the right-hand side of this structure, 85% of the people in the world don't have a diagnosed mental illness, but only 20% of them are at the top right corner where they are flourishing. So not having a diagnosed mental illness does not mean that you're mentally well. In fact, many people fall in the bottom right here, languishing, and we have all seen global stats on stress, loneliness, and disengagement from work. Now we look at the left side, and these are the people with a diagnosed mental health condition. Some studies have found that 70% of them had a moderate to flourishing level of mental wellness, meaning they can be happy and function well in life. So mental wellness can coexist with mental illness. We are not suggesting here that mental wellness can cure mental illness, but many mental wellness practices can fortify us and help to reduce the risk and the severity and the symptoms of mental illness. Mental wellness is an active process of moving from languishing to flourishing. On one level, It is about building resilience so we can deal with things that come with life, like stressful and adverse events. But mental wellness is more than resilience. We want to move toward flourishing at the top here, which is a more meaningful, richer, and deeper human experience. Of course, flourishing is a subjective thing. For some people, it could be a sense of fulfillment in life. For others, maybe being in a flow state of peak performance, or even being in a spiritual state of self-transcendence. But the desire to be happy and fulfilled, to be connected with other people, and to not suffer, these are universal longings shared by all people. So there's no stigma in proactively working toward a better state of mental well-being. In this slide, we compare some of the concepts and approaches between mental illness and mental wellness. We have a much more detailed discussion in the main report. But here, I want to highlight the concept of self-care. To a large extent, the mental wellness industry grows out of a grassroots movement of consumers looking for ways to deal with everyday mental challenges. Most of them don't have mental illness. They're looking for options outside of the pathogenic and clinical approach. They're not looking for talk therapy and medication. They want to take initiative for self-care, and the rise of the mental wellness industry is a response to this need. Before we get to the mental wellness industry, we want to provide some context by showing you the different pathways for mental wellness. I am sure you are familiar with many things on this list, and you probably practice some of them. In this framework, we segment mental wellness practices into 4 main categories: activity and creativity, growth and nourishment, rest and rejuvenation, and connection and meaning. Mental wellness is holistic and multidimensional, so each of these categories has a mind, body, and internal-external dimension. And inside these boxes are some specific examples of practices, strategies, or modalities. We call them pathways because mental wellness is a process that we need to engage with. And these pathways are personal and subjective. You can choose your own path. What works for you may not work for me, but there are many options available for everybody. And sometimes our circumstances change, and we may need to try a different path.
When we talk about these individual pathways and practices for mental wellness, we're not trying to make it a blame game. We're not saying that it's your fault if you're not happy or if you get depressed because you just didn't meditate enough or you didn't read enough self-help books. Unfortunately, this is a misconception that the media loves to write about. I'm sure you've all seen these headlines, or maybe you even wrote some of them, bashing the self-help, mindfulness, happiness, positive psychology, and wellness movements. We could do a whole other presentation just to talk about what's going on in these articles. But the point I want to make here is that the media does raise many important questions about mental wellness, especially about equity, affordability, and access. And what is the role of prevention in the mental health field? What about when we're living through a crisis or we don't even have our basic needs met? And whose job is it to deal with all of these challenges? And how do we, as researchers, deal with these kinds of questions in a study that is talking about mental wellness as an industry or a business opportunity? I'm sure all of you are familiar with Maslow's pyramid, but we should not be thinking of mental wellness as a hierarchy of needs, where we first deal with our basic needs like safety, food, and employment, and then we move up the pyramid to loftier pursuits like mental health, happiness, and fulfillment. We want to give you a new way to think about mental wellness as 3 concentric circles that all work together. In the center are the individual practices and pathways that we talked about a moment ago. These are the tools that empower us, build up our internal mental wellness resources, and help us cope with the challenges that life throws at us. These individual practices are important and useful for everyone, even for people living in the most adverse circumstances. For example, a growing number of research studies show that meditation can be very helpful for people living in homeless shelters, prisons, and refugee camps, because it gives them a tool to deal with stress and build resilience, even though we know that meditation cannot fix those underlying circumstances. But our individual behavior alone is not enough. The next ring in this model is our immediate living environments, our families, neighborhoods, workplaces, and schools. These have a huge influence on either helping or hurting our mental wellness. For example, if we work in a toxic workplace culture, no amount of meditating can make that go away. If we live in a neighborhood with a park and lots of trees, it will be easier for us to access the healing power of nature. The third and outside ring represents the macroeconomic and societal conditions that are entirely outside of our individual control, things like the COVID-19 pandemic. These are often the cause of our mental unwellness, and they can even lead to mental illness. Governments are, of course, responsible for dealing with that outside ring, and government policy can help us address mental wellness at every single level in these three circles. But this is a study about industry and business. So where does the private sector sit in this landscape? Well, businesses can play a huge role in the two inner circles. At the individual level, businesses are helping to bring new mental wellness modalities and practices to more and more consumers through different channels and at different price points. In the middle circle, businesses also shape our physical and built environments and the culture of those environments. We'd like you to keep this framework in mind as we move now into talking about the industry of mental wellness. The industry gives us tools and access to mental wellness practices. But industry alone is not the solution to all of the mental health and wellness challenges in our society today. Now let's take another look at the mental wellness pathways. When we think about how wide-ranging these pathways are, we can see that businesses and organizations across the entire economy can play a role in supporting our mental wellness. But at the same time, there are many businesses who provide products, services, and experiences that specifically target our mental wellness. Things like reducing stress, building resilience, improving sleep, and preventing cognitive decline. These businesses typically fit into two of the mental wellness pathways: growth and nourishment, and rest and rejuvenation. From those pathways, we have identified 4 sectors that make up the mental wellness economy: self-improvement, meditation and mindfulness, brain-boosting nutraceuticals and botanicals, and senses, spaces, and sleep. We estimate that mental wellness was a $121 billion industry worldwide in 2019. These numbers measure consumer spending in each of the 4 sectors. We are focusing specifically on consumer-driven and private sector activities here, things that are outside of the medical and mental health treatment sphere. The 4 mental wellness sectors are incredibly broad and diverse. Sometimes the boundaries between them are not always clear or easy to define. In our report, you will find pages and pages of detailed information about each sector, including definitions, historical evolution, and current trends and developments. We put a lot of words on this slide because we wanted you to get a small taste of the breadth of products, services, activities, and solutions that are within each of these sectors. Some of the products are meant for people's homes, some are used in workplaces, and some are being pioneered in the spa, hospitality, and travel arena. Some things are very high-tech and based on the latest science, while many of the products are very simple, like books, vitamins, blankets, and candles. Some of these products are passing fads, like adult coloring books and different types of stress toys. But many of the practices have been around for thousands of years, like meditation, aromatherapy, and psychoactive plants. Some of the products here are controversial, and some are not even legal in most of the world, like cannabis and psychedelics. Technology cuts across all of these sectors and has become a huge focus for investors. Mental health and wellness tech startups received over $1 billion in investment funding just in the first quarter of this year. A lot of this interest is because investors see the potential to use tech platforms to bring mental wellness practices into the mental health arena as complementary and supplemental care. But when we think about the role of technology in the mental wellness sector, let's not forget that technology is also a major cause of mental unwellness today. And so we need to be careful how we deploy it. Sometimes the most healthy thing we can do is turn off our devices entirely. All of these mental wellness practices and products need more research and scientific evidence behind them. Some modalities, like meditation, light therapy, circadian science, and psychedelics, are starting to build up a strong body of evidence, while others are largely untested and unproven. Also, these businesses are mostly unregulated. It is left to consumers to determine whether they believe in and find benefit from these products and services or not. And with so many celebrities, gurus, and influencers peddling different products today, it is increasingly hard to figure out what is real and what is pseudoscience and just false promises. We have identified 4 sectors in the mental wellness industry. But that does not mean that these are the most important or most effective practices for our mental wellness. Some of the most important things we should do for mental wellness are basic healthy lifestyle habits, like eating well and exercising. And many of the most effective things we can do are free and are not a business opportunity, like spending time in nature, spending time with friends, joining a spiritual community, listening to music, or just taking a walk. This study is the first time that anyone has defined and measured mental wellness as an industry. And it's exciting to see these big numbers. With the mental wellness crisis that the world is now facing under COVID-19, there are massive needs to be met. There is huge demand and there are huge opportunities. Business innovation is important, but businesses also need to be cautious because businesses are responsible for what they offer and what they do. We should not look at this $121 billion industry and this study as the next profit-making grab, but rather as an opportunity to make sure that we are offering the right kinds of mental wellness solutions to the people who desperately need this help. This opportunity is also much bigger than just a business and industry growth scenario. As Ophelia mentioned earlier, mental unwellness and illness are a massive economic and societal burden worldwide. But a growing body of research shows that practices that improve our mental wellness can lessen the symptoms of mental illness and can even reduce our risk of developing a mental illness. Good mental wellness is linked with many positive outcomes, including better physical health, longevity, social relationships, and work performance. And so governments and businesses have an incentive to promote mental wellness because it can help address the massive and rapidly growing cost burden of poor mental health. I'm sure most of you are familiar with our wellness economy bubble chart. Now that we have defined and measured mental wellness, we are adding a new industry bubble to this chart for the very first time. Since mental wellness overlaps with some of the other industry bubbles, and since this chart combines different years of data, the overall wellness economy remains at $4.5 trillion. But of course, all of these numbers are looking backward at what was happening prior to COVID-19. This year has brought major disruptions to the economy and major changes in the marketplace. There is growing attention on wellness and mental wellness, while simultaneously inequality is rising and many consumers' livelihoods are being decimated. We're still in the middle of the pandemic, so it remains to be seen how these disruptions will play out. Next year, our GWI research will focus on updating the wellness economy numbers. By that point, we can hope that we are beyond the pandemic, can understand its impact, and can look forward to the new opportunities ahead.
Thank you so much for, as usual, incredible research. I'm sure there are questions. You're going to have to do the house lights a little for me here so I can see. I'm a little blinded. And Anna is with us to bring the questions of our global group to light. So Anna, let's start with you, and then we'll go to Julie in the room.
Well, thank you. And lots of chat about what a great presentation and how important this subject is. And I have a question that is kind of from Adelina Hernandez, but she said, how important is actually happiness for our mental well-being? And a lot of people are saying that happiness is bad for mental well-being, and instead that purpose is something better, to have purpose instead of seeking happiness. And actually, Martin Palmer told me a couple of years ago when we started speaking that happiness is not good for mental well-being, but contentment is the key to mental well-being. So I don't know what your view on happiness and mental well-being and the pursuit of happiness is.
Okay, I think when we talk about happiness, we have to remember that there are a lot of different types of happiness. When you go into the field of psychology, it goes back even historically to the Greek words, hedonic happiness and eudaimonic happiness. And hedonic happiness, I think, is what people think of first when they say happiness. It's like, wow, I had ice cream, I feel great. Or, I went for a run, I got this rush of adrenaline. And, that's one type of happiness. But the other type, eudaimonic, is more what you're talking about in terms of contentment and purpose and sort of a bigger, purpose in life, that I feel like I'm working towards something, I'm accomplishing something, I'm feeling fulfilled. And so when you look at happiness in those different aspects, sure, there can be some negative sides to it. If we're just focused on the hedonic side, oh, did I do something today that just made me feel good and smile? It's not enough. We do have to have that other part of happiness to really have a well-rounded life, and to have a sense of mental wellness, and to really have all those aspects that bring the positive benefits to us.
Katherine, thank you so much for answering that. We'll take one from this room, and then I'll come back to you, Anna. Julie Bach? Is that Julie Bach?
Yes, it is. It's beautiful to see you ladies, and I'm so glad that we get to connect with you. My question is, what is so different about this time around with self-improvement than it was in the 70s and 80s? What's different about self-improvement?
I don't think there's that much different about the concept. Well, there are maybe two things that are different. Is one, there are so many more ways for people to figure out how to do it. It used to be mainly books or maybe some TV guru. Now there are just so many more mediums for accessing those advice. And I think this time around too, it is much more widespread. It used to be more like a fringe concept, and I think that maybe more women were into self-improvement, but this idea is now being really spread and had permeated multiple fields, like in business and sports, in performance, and so there's an uptick amount, especially among men, because now it's okay to talk about self-care, improving yourself, your performance, and performing like build your business professionally. So it is. So I think it's just much more widespread and much more accepted.
Thank you, Ophelia. Anna, back to you. Have you got another question from somewhere in the world?
I do, from somewhere in the world. Chris Ryle asked, what role should government, local, provincial, state, and federal, play in mental wellness? Educational only, or even some type of mandating different programs in schools, etc.?
I would say government role is essential. If you remember that chart we showed in our presentation with the rings, the government plays a role at every single level. There's the macro policy. Are we living in a conflict? That depends on government policy to fix that for us. We can't do that. But I think that center ring is actually really essential for government. It's not something that everyone's aware of, and that's the immediate environments that we live in. So that could be our schools, our workplaces, our neighborhoods, our homes, our communities. Those are huge influences on how we feel, and the government can shape those in terms of urban planning and what our built environment looks like, and making sure we have access to nature and to parks and to all kinds of things that we need to be able to go out and do those things in order to feel mentally well. And so having that stuff around us is a big factor in for everyone. If you can't pay for it, you need to still be able to access those things for free. So that's a massive role for government that people don't always think of. But yes, the policy in the schools, in offering programs, teaching, there are practices like meditation that we know are shown to be incredibly beneficial for everyone. And the more we can integrate those for children and everyone in society to learn that and sort of build it into their lifestyle, that will help everyone. And so there's certainly a government role there too, but important across the board.
Thank you, Catherine. Is there anybody in the room here in Palm Beach who has a question for Catherine and Ophelia? Okay, Anna, back to you. There seem to be more questions coming from the group online.
Yes, we're getting lots of questions coming in. Tajana Tranchi. Okay, sorry, no way I pronounced that correctly. Mental wellness and negative news information. What would be a right way? Isolate yourself or not, considering that negative thinking impact our mental wellness. So quite a difficult. Should we isolate or not? What do you say, ladies?
Well, I can only speak from personal experience. It's there's so much, because we always try to work on not reacting, but if we expose ourselves to too much stimuli, it's very hard. So I personally I limit my consumption of news on days that I don't want to, or election night I just don't watch. I spend 15 minutes on breathing exercise. I think we have some control. We cannot let the outside world just take over. We have to find some space. It's actually it's in our mind. We have to control how we react. So only we can do that to ourselves or for ourselves.
Thank you.
100% agree, and I have to say that again, listening to too much news, it activates the amygdala, and we're not thinking rationally. So just limit, not too much is a good thing. So is there a marker? This is from Guari Misra Destipando. I am so sorry for I can only say I'm Swedish. That's why I can't pronounce his names. Is there a marker for companies to know that they have improved the mental wellness of their employees, like a certification of sorts? Have you found anything?
There's no certification out there that I know of. I mean, this is something we looked into a little more a few years ago when we did our workplace wellness research. And of course, there are, rankings and programs where companies can show that they are good places to work for their employees and healthy places to work. Those are actually pretty good measures. You're not looking just narrowly at, okay, did I offer my employees a meditation program? But the bigger picture and the bigger outcome from that, is this a place where people want to come in every day? They feel happy working there. They have friends at work. I mean, those are good outcome measures that what you're doing in your workplace environment is effective. So I would look more toward those than just a narrow certification at, say, are you doing the right kinds of programs for mental wellness? Although it is, of course, helpful for companies to have guidance on that too. But, I think you'll know if your employees are feeling, good about where they work or not, usually.
When research is done across companies, like Catherine mentioned, there are different metrics. You can survey your employees, but in general, you look at the turnover rate, you can really tell. For example, if you're compared to your industry, for example, we know at the breakers, the turnover rate is way below hospitality industry. That is a measure. You cannot lie about that one. When people vote with their feet, they will leave. they're disengaged, they're not happy, and it's always mental when they're not happy at the job.
Ladies, thank you.
So those are, and then focus on outcome measures.
Thank you so much. We are actually out of time, but before you go, I just want to ask if anything surprised you when you were doing this research.
I would say the biggest surprise is just the breadth of this sector. You know, when we started this research, we didn't know what was going to be part of the industry. I mean, everyone says meditation. Probably the second thing they would say is cannabis or psychedelics. But what else is in there? And the more we dug into it, you know, the more we really pieced together just the immense diversity of things that are out there that are being marketed for mental wellness. You know, from the foods and the supplements to coaching, and I mean, it's just so many things happening. So it's exciting to see how many opportunities there are and how much is out there. And also, again, like we said in our presentation, we have to be cautious and sort of match those up against, what are those pathways that are the most important for us for mental wellness. And so it was exciting and challenging to put those pieces together.